The cold enforcer. She stood at the edge of the landing bay, her face blank, her stance perfect. Every movement was controlled, exact. She was not like others. She had been trained since birth to be without emotion, without weakness. Her. People called her a cold enforcer, a living weapon made for diplomacy, war, and fear. Her name didn't matter. Names were tools for attachment. She had only her rank, commander. The massive human ship floated before her, docking slowly at the Galactic Council's neutral station. For the first time in years, humans were being invited to a peace summit, and she had been chosen to represent her species as the liaison to the humans. It was supposed to be easy, but nothing about humans ever was. Maintain control, she reminded herself in a whisper, though her voice held no feeling. She had read about humans emotional, chaotic, unpredictable, dangerous. That's why her. Leaders sent someone like her, someone who would not be influenced, someone cold. The docking hatch hissed. A ramp extended. And then he walked out, the human. He wasn't armored. He didn't carry weapons. Just a light uniform and a calm smile on his face. He looked directly at her and nodded. "Hello, I'm Elias, human liaison. I guess we'll be working together." She didn't speak, just stared. His voice was soft. His tone was relaxed, not formal like most diplomats. Strange. "You don't speak?" Elias asked, his tone still kind. "I speak when needed," she answered flatly. Her voice was calm, hollow, practiced. "Right," Elias said with a short chuckle. "Well, I'm glad to meet you. You're taller than I expected." She blinked. A useless reaction. "Your expectations are irrelevant." But Elias only smiled again. "Fair enough." They walked together through the station's long corridor. She walked in silence, every step measured. He walked with ease, hands behind his back, observing everything with curious eyes. It annoyed her, not that he looked around, but that she noticed him doing it. That should not happen. Her mind scanned every detail of the human beside her, his breathing, posture, expression. Not for weakness, not for threat, just observing. Why? They reached the meeting chamber. Inside were ambassadors from 12 different species. She took her place beside her people's seat. Elias stood next to her, but didn't sit. "You don't sit?" she asked, without looking at him. "Not yet. I like to read the room first," he said quietly. "Read the room?" He leaned slightly toward her. "It means watching how people act, how they feel. Gives you an idea of what might happen." She glanced at him. Emotion clouds judgment. He smiled again, too many smiles. "Sometimes, but sometimes it reveals the truth faster than logic." She didn't answer. She didn't like that answer. The council session began. Voices filled the room, some calm, some harsh. Discussions about war borders, trade, and human expansion. Elias didn't speak for a long time, but when he did, every voice stopped. Didn't shout. He didn't argue. He spoke softly, clearly, and with stories. Stories? He shared how humans had rebuilt destroyed colonies, helped feed starving planets, even saved an enemy ship drifting through space. He didn't try to sound powerful. He just sounded human, and they listened. Even she listened. When the session ended, she found herself watching him walk out of the chamber, hands in his pockets, whistling softly. She stood there a moment longer. Then, her heart did something it was not supposed to do. It beat faster. She returned to her quarters, sat down, and stared at the wall. Her pulse had not risen like that in years. Not even during battle. "This is wrong," she said aloud to herself. "This is a response to an unknown factor. It is not real." But even as she said it, her mind replayed Elias's voice. Sometimes emotion reveals the truth faster than logic. She shut her eyes tightly, tried to push it away, But the wall she had spent years building, stone by cold stone, had a small hairline crack now, and it had a human smile at the center of it. Asterisk. Unexpected heat. She told herself it was nothing. The faster heartbeat. The short breath. The way her mind wandered back to the human's voice. It was simply a biological reaction. A minor glitch. Temporary. But the next day proved she was wrong. She arrived at the strategy hall early, as always. Lights dimmed. Charts glowing above the circular table. Everything in place. Perfect. Predictable. Then Elias walked in, a cup of hot liquid in his hand, humming a soft tune. "You're early too," he said. "I do not waste time," she replied. He smiled and held out the cup. "Try this. It's coffee. Might melt the ice around you." She looked at the cup like it was poison. "I do not consume unknown substances," Elias laughed softly. "Smart. But it's just human energy drink. We use it to stay awake." She took the cup slowly, inspecting it. Her fingers brushed against his dot. It lasted only a second, but it hit like a pulse of heat through her hand, up her arm, and straight into her chest. She quickly pulled back. "You should not touch me." "Sorry," he said gently. "Just being friendly." She placed the cup down without sipping. Her fingers still tingled. That had never happened before. Later, during the council's briefing, she sat beside him again. This time, her body remained tense. Every time he leaned forward or adjusted in his chair, she noticed. Worse. She waited for it. "What's your rank?" she asked him suddenly. Elias looked surprised. "I'm not military, just diplomatic." "Then why are you here?" "To build trust," he said. "To learn how others think, feel." "Feelings are weakness," she replied sharply. Elias turned to her, his voice calm. "No, feelings are how we know something matters." She looked away. After the meeting, the station shook with a sudden jolt. Alarms blared. Lights flickered. Red. A gas leak had triggered an explosion in one of the side halls. Panic spread. Officers ran toward the scene. She followed protocol, rushing to check for danger. Then she heard a familiar voice shout, "Over here." She turned a corner and saw Elias trapped beneath a fallen pipe, flames rising nearby. Without thinking, she grabbed the pipe and lifted it with all her strength. He rolled free just as the wall behind him cracked. She grabbed his arm and pulled him into a safe room. The door sealed behind them. Silence fell. He coughed, then laughed. Well, that got exciting fast. She stared at him, her breathing heavy, her hand still on his arm. He looked at her, eyes steady. "You saved me." "I followed protocol," she said. But even she didn't believe her own voice. They stood there, close, the room small and silent. Then Elias said something that sent a chill down her spine. "Your hand. It's still shaking." She looked down. Her hand was trembling. Not from pain. Not from fear. From something else. She let go of him instantly. This shouldn't be happening. Elias sat down quietly, watching her with gentle eyes. "Maybe it should." "No," she whispered. "I am not made to feel." "But you just did." She turned her back to him, trying to breathe steady. Her mind raced. She was supposed to be cold, controlled, untouched by emotion. But now, trapped in a quiet room with one kind human, her walls were melting, and she didn't know how to stop it. Asterisk, cracks in the wall. She couldn't sleep. Her mind, once a sharp and quiet machine, now refused to rest. Thoughts came in waves, strange, unfamiliar thoughts. Not strategy. Not calculations, but questions. Why had she reacted that way when he touched her? Why did his voice echo in her memory? And most of all, why did she care? She sat alone in her quarters. The room was dim, clean, silent, just the way she used to prefer it. But now, It felt cold in a different way. She looked down at her hands. They had held weapons, crushed bones, broken machines. But yesterday, they trembled just from holding his arm. Unacceptable. She stood and activated her training module combat simulation. Level 10. The hardest level. The enemy droids appeared around her. She moved fast, striking with precision, dodging, flipping, destroying each one in seconds. But she wasn't focused. In the middle of her fight, one voice rang in her head. Your hand. It's still shaking. She missed a step. A training drone struck her shoulder. Her body spun and slammed into the wall. She gasped, an actual gasp. Her heart beat faster, not from pain, but from frustration. She had never lost control in training. Before. Never. She ended the simulation and dropped to her knees. Something inside her was breaking. Something her creators had warned her about. Emotion. She was trained to resist it, suppress it, but now it was leaking through. The next day, she saw Elias again. He was in the station's observation deck, looking out into space. He didn't notice her at first. She didn't speak. She just stood beside him. Stars glittered across the black sky. Nebulas swirled in the distance. Beautiful, isn't it? Elias said quietly. I don't look at stars for beauty, she replied. He glanced at her, a soft smile playing at the edge of his lips. Then what do you look for? Weakness, threats, movement. That sounds lonely. She didn't respond. They stood in silence. For the first time, she wasn't analyzing him. She was just there. I had a dream last night, Elias said. I do not dream, she said quickly. Maybe not yet. She frowned. Why would I dream? Dreams are what our minds show us when our walls fall, he said. Her eyes narrowed. My walls do not fall. Elias turned to her. Then why are you here, standing next to me, instead of training like usual? She had no answer, because it was true. She had changed her schedule, just to be near him. Her breathing slowed. Her body tensed again, not in fear, but in realization. She was changing, and it scared her more than any weapon ever had. That night, she did dream. It came as flickers, flashes of memory and possibility. In the dream, she stood on a battlefield, alone, victorious, surrounded by silence. Then suddenly, Elias appeared, offering his hand, not as an enemy, not as a mission partner, but as a friend. When she reached out, the world cracked like glass. She woke up gasping. She had never dreamed before. She looked at her reflection in the mirror across the room. For the first time, she didn't recognize the person staring back. Not the cold enforcer, not the perfect soldier. Just a woman. Confused, scared, and feeling. Asterisk, the mission shift. The warning lights turned red. An alarm echoed through the Galactic station. Heavy. Doors began to lock down section by section. Security bots rolled into place. She was in the hallway when the voice came over the speakers. Breach detected. Unknown hostile force inbound. Evacuate all outer corridors. Before she could move, she heard it. Explosions. 1. Then 2. She ran. People were screaming, running past her. But she wasn't afraid. She wasn't trained for fear. She was trained for survival, for command. Then she saw Elias. He was helping a small alien child who had fallen. The child was crying, legs shaking. Leave him, she shouted. There is no time. But Elias didn't. He picked the child up and turned to her. If we leave one behind, what's the point of saving the rest? Before she could argue, a blast hit the corridor wall. The ceiling above them cracked. She grabbed both Elias and the child and pulled them into a side access tunnel. The metal door slammed shut behind them. The lights flickered. The space was tight, Too tight. She stood back, her breath controlled. Elias sat on the floor with the child, holding his hand until he calmed. Once the child fell asleep, Elias looked at her. "You would have left him," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, without emotion. Tactically correct. He didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Have you ever saved someone just because it was right, not because it was ordered?" She paused, then said, "No." He nodded slowly. "I used to think that way too. Until my first mission." She turned toward him. His eyes were distant, now memories rising. There was a battle. We were fighting a group that ambushed our aid transport. My team was sent to neutralize them. During the mission, I found a young alien barely alive, terrified, hiding behind a crate. She stared at him, listening, but not understanding why. She cared. My commander said leave him, said it was a distraction, a trap. But something in me refused. I picked him up and ran all the way back. We were ambushed again. I nearly died, but the child lived. Years later, that same child became a peace envoy who stopped a full war. She said nothing. Elias looked at her. "You were trained to never feel, but you protected me during the explosion." That wasn't programming. That was you. Her hands tightened at her sides. I followed protocol. "No," he said quietly. "You broke it." The silence that followed was heavy. She looked at her reflection in the metal wall. Once again, she didn't recognize herself. A moment later, a soft sound escaped her lips. Not speech, a breath, like a sigh. She hated it, not because it was weak, but because it felt real. Hours passed. Child had been picked up by medics. She and Elias remained inside the safe room, waiting for clearance. She sat across from him, staring at the floor. "Why are you like this?" she asked, voice softer than before. "Like what?" "So calm, kind. You see pain and still smile." Elias smiled faintly. "Because someone has to be. Pain is everywhere. Someone needs to remember what peace feels like." She shook her head slowly. "Your words confuse me." "Maybe that's a good thing." She glanced at him. And for the first time since her creation, she wanted to ask something not related to the mission. "Would you have saved me too? Even if I were your enemy?" He looked straight into her eyes. "Yes." Her breath caught. She didn't respond. But deep inside her, something shifted. Not broken, not damaged. Just worn. Asterisk, breaking protocol. The next day, everything changed. She stood before the council chamber, tall and silent as always. But inside, something was no longer still. Across the room, Elias was being questioned. Again, the Galactic Council had called for an emergency hearing. The explosion from the day before had exposed a security breach. Someone had tampered with the defense systems. Fingers pointed in many directions, some even toward humanity. "They were the last to join us," one alien ambassador said, "and the only ones unscanned before entry." Elias raised his hands. "You can check every file. We came in peace. We've always helped." But they weren't listening. She knew the pattern. Once blame started, logic disappeared. One council member stood. "Until we know the truth, the human delegation is to be confined." Elias looked at her. Just a glance, but she felt it. The quiet trust in his eyes. The silent hope that she, of all people, would speak. And that's when the voice, in her mind trained to obey, to follow orders, finally shattered. She stepped forward. "Objection." The room went silent. All eyes turned toward her. "You are not permitted to speak in this session," said the lead chairman. "I no longer follow that rule," she said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The lead chairman's eyes narrowed. "Explain. Yourself, enforcer." She looked at Elias, then back at the council. You blame him for an attack we all suffered. But I was with him. He risked his life to save others. He carried a child to safety. He did not run. He did not hide. He did not harm. A pause. Your logic is flawed. Another pause. My loyalty is no longer to programming. It is to what is right. Murmurs filled the chamber. One of her own commanders stood. You are breaking your code. You were not created to decide. She turned to him. Her voice was calm. Then perhaps I was created wrong. That line struck like thunder. A council froze. No cold enforcer had ever defied their chain of control. She walked over to Elias and stood beside him. Not in front. Not behind. Beside. I request immediate withdrawal from this trial. If you judge him guilty, then include me as well. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Elias looked shaken. I didn't ask you to do this, he said softly. I know, she replied. But I chose to? For the first time, her voice had emotion. Not much, but enough to show the galaxy that something had changed, that she had changed. Later, inside a quiet hallway, Elias turned to her. You didn't have to stand beside me. She looked away for a moment, then said, You once asked if I had ever saved someone because it felt right. He smiled gently. That was your answer. She nodded. I broke protocol, she whispered, and found your freedom. She didn't speak again, but her silence no longer felt cold. It felt honest. And in that quiet, something new was born. Love. Not yet, but something powerful. Choice. Asterisk. The warm choice. A message came the next morning. A sealed command order from her homeworld. No greetings, no questions. Just one line. Return immediately for reconditioning. You have deviated from core behavior. She stood frozen, reading the words again and again. Reconditioning meant memory wipe. Reset. Erase everything she had felt. Every thought. Every emotion. Every trace of him. She stared at the screen for a long time, then turned it off. Elias sat in the docking bay, his bag beside him, waiting quietly for his ship to be cleared for departure. He hadn't seen her since the council session. Maybe she regretted what she did. Maybe she was gone. Then the door slid open. She stepped in, no longer in her cold enforcer armor. She wore simple clothes, now neutral, soft, no rank, no symbol. Elias stood slowly. You came, he said, unsure. She walked toward him, her voice steady but quiet. They ordered me to return. His expression dropped. You're leaving? She shook her head. I'm staying. A beat of silence. He blinked. You'll be marked. Hunted, maybe. I know. He stepped closer. Why? She looked up at him. No walls. No mask. Just her. Because I finally made a choice, and it was mine. He reached out gently, unsure, but she took his hand before he could ask. I want to understand this feeling, she whispered. Not because I was told to, but because you made me want to. Elias smiled softly, eyes warm. You don't need to understand everything, just be here. She nodded once, and for the first time in her life, she smiled back. Not perfectly, not like a human, but it was real. The ship launched quietly. Leaving the station behind, two figures stood side by side near the observation glass. The stars stretched across the dark, infinite sky, and the woman who had once been built to be cold now walked forward step by step into warmth, into choice, into humanity.